You're watching the Daily Climate Show on Sky News. On today's programme, the scale of the environmental emergency is laid bare as the Earth's vital signs show the impact of climate change. How unequal access to COVID-19 vaccines could put the landmark COP26 summit at risk. And the nature projects across the UK getting a share of £40 million. Hello and welcome to the UK's only daily climate news show where we track the changes happening to our world right now and meet those coming up with the solutions. And the level of global warming that's shown here on our data dashboard is just one way that we can see the rate of climate change. Now, scientists around the world measure the Earth's vital signs, and 2 years ago they declared a climate emergency. Now, those measures have been updated and they show the emergency is getting worse, with more than half of data points setting new records over the past 2 years. Glacier thickness is at a record low level. They're melting much faster than thought, losing 31% more snow and ice annually than just 15 years ago. Oceans are the warmest they've been since these types of records began. Combined with ocean acidification at the second highest it's ever been, the world's coral reefs are facing even more damage from bleaching. And that's a significant issue because more than 500 million people depend on coral reefs for food, tourism and tropical storm surge protection. In April 2021, carbon dioxide concentration reached 416 parts per million. That's the highest monthly global average concentration ever recorded. And research found farmed animals such as cows and sheep number a record 4 billion, weighing more than all wild animals and humans put together. And livestock accounts for about 14.5% of total greenhouse gas emissions. But there are signs of hope too. Subsidies for fossil fuels fell significantly as governments stopped supporting industries such as oil and gas and moved towards renewable energy. Well, the research was led by a team of scientists at Oregon State University, including Dr. Beverly Law, who joins me now. Welcome to you. So your study found that the majority of the 31 vital signs set new records. So how worrying is that?
After COVID, we've had several years of being confined and changing our habits, and it really didn't change the numbers. Things just got worse. 60% of those variables got worse.
And how close would you say we are to tipping points? Those thresholds that once crossed could spark big and possibly irreversible effects.
Well, the most worrying thing is the loss of Brazilian forests. Their loss has increased even more, and they are really the workhorse of taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. They're the natural source or natural removals of carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere. So that's a worrying thing, and it looks like it could be really close to tipping points. Some of those areas could turn into different vegetation types and not be forests anymore.
So what do you think needs to change to try and alter those trajectories?
Well, we've got to stop putting it off. We've spent 30 years not doing much of anything, and now we only have 10 to 30 years to make significant changes in reducing fossil fuel emissions. Just not using carbon-based energy sources. And that includes bioenergy. So that's the first one. And then improving or protecting those natural removals, we call them natural climate solutions. That's the land and ocean ecosystems. So we really need to tackle that now. I just keep seeing like the US nationally determined contributions don't say anything about protecting the remaining intact forests, temperate rainforests in the country.
Were you personally shocked at the findings of your own report?
Yeah, I was really hoping that because of COVID, people stopped and thought about how they're living and what their behavior has been and how they've been able to get by without much. And so I thought that would be reflected in the numbers, but it's not. It's worse.
Dr. Beverly Law, thanks very much indeed.
You're welcome.
In today's other climate news, a wildfire's path of destruction through California has been captured by a forest camera. The footage shows flames from the Dixie wildfire spreading through trees before engulfing the camera itself. The Dixie fire has burned through an area bigger than New York City so far, and scientists say climate change will only make these highly destructive fires more common. Several towns on the shore of Lake Como have been evacuated after torrential rain caused landslides and flooding across the popular tourist destination. More than 60 people have been rescued from the floods, which filled the usually picturesque lake with debris. The extreme weather comes just days after hailstones the size of tennis balls damaged nearly 100 cars in northern Italy. The High Court has agreed to hear a case brought by environmental campaigners against the UK government and the Oil and Gas Authority. Environmental campaigners say tax breaks that cover the cost of decommissioning, which is the dismantling and clearing old infrastructure, are inconsistent with Britain's climate change goals. Michaela Loge is one of the climate activists who brought the legal challenge.
We're definitely not asking the government to do everything overnight. We're just asking them to actually have their actions be in line with what they say. If they want to say they're a climate leader, if they want to say what they want is a climate just future, then they need to act in the same way. The IEA, the International Energy Agency, has recently said that we can have no new investment in oil and gas if we are to stay below 1.5 degrees of warming and prevent complete climate collapse.
And the finalists for this year's Wellcome Photography Prize have been announced. The prize includes a category, Health in a Heating World, which explores how the rapidly changing climate can bring medical challenges. The category finalist Zakir Hussain Chowdhury's entry, The Climate Cost, shows a man salvaging his belongings from the wreckage of his house after Cyclone Amphan hit Bangladesh. The crucial COP26 climate summit negotiations in November could be under threat because of unequal access to vaccines. The chair of the Least Developed Countries group told Sky News those most affected by climate change are at risk of not being included in the discussions. Well, our climate reporter Victoria Seabrook broke this story. She's here with me now. So tell us more, Victoria.
Yes, so this week I've been speaking to global figures that represent 46 countries and 1,500 NGOs around the world at COP26, these crucial climate negotiations happening in Glasgow in November. And what they're saying is that unequitable, unfair access to the vaccine is a threat to these negotiations. Now, the UK, as hosts, has said it's going to try and vaccinate anyone coming to Glasgow who wouldn't otherwise have access to the vaccine. But these organisations, these leading global figures are saying that's sort of not the point because the pandemic is still raging globally. We'll need 11 billion doses of the vaccine to end it for good. And these talks, they're all about trust and countries coming to the table and saying, yes, we'll make big pledges to cut our emissions and tackle climate change in good faith that other countries will do the same. So poorer nations are saying, why should we make these big pledges when, by the way, we've done the least to cause climate change in the first place, if you rich countries aren't playing ball when it comes to access to the vaccine? And there's also a moral question about whether people like diplomats, although doing very important jobs, should be able to jump the queue ahead of the vulnerable in their population when it comes to accessing the COVID-19 vaccine.
Victoria, thanks very much indeed. Now, 90 projects across the UK have been awarded government grants aimed at supporting green jobs and boosting nature recovery. The initiatives will each receive a share of £40 million and range from tree planting projects to restoring wetlands. Chester Zoo will receive nearly £1 million to create a nature recovery corridor.
We want to connect habitats for wildlife. So habitat connectivity is really important. It's one of the major causes for decline in numerous different species because species need they need a lot from their environment. They need food, they need water, they need shelter, and they can't get that, or they can't necessarily get that depending on the species in isolated pockets. They need to be able to move, whether that's to forage for their food or for other reasons.
Well, joining me now is Environment Minister Rebecca Powell. Now, tell us more about what kind of projects are getting this funding and how they've been chosen.
The Green Recovery Challenge Fund was a fund set up last year, actually. The first £40 million was shared out last year, largely to environmental charities and conservation groups and organisations to do work to restore nature and also to ensure that jobs were either retained or new jobs created green jobs, because there's a raft of opportunities now as we go and create many more sustainable projects for our nature restoration and for that other side of the coin to climate change, which is nature and adaptation.
So it's all about kick-starting nature recovery and tackling climate change, as you say. And welcome though that is, there's still a long way to go, isn't there? I mean, the government's own advisors, the Climate Change Committee, has said there's a vacuum in policy. So when will we hear about those policies that are going to get us to net zero?
Well, one of the things, of course, we're hearing a lot about right now, and I've been responsible for bringing the Environment Bill through the House of Commons. It's now been going through the Lords, and it will gain royal assent by the autumn. Well, that is a landmark piece of legislation that will set us on a sustainable footing for the future. And within that, we will be setting targets in air quality, in water quality, waste and recycling, and nature, which will reset the dial in terms of really a more sustainable future. And one of those targets, we've said that we will aim to halt the decline of species abundance, basically nature, by 2030. That's a groundbreaking and very bold target. No other government has done anything like this. We've also got, of course, our net zero commitment to achieve by 2030. And indeed, we were the first economy to introduce a law to end our contribution to climate change by 2050. So there are a whole range of measures now coming into play and commitments.
You've talked a lot about the targets that are set and everyone agrees they're ambitious. It's the action that we're not getting, is it? We need those policies. When are we going to hear them?
Those policies, we're already working on all the targets, and all the pilots are running around the country to inform us of exactly how people will put all these measures into practice. I've actually just been out on a farm today in Shropshire, meeting a farmer who's already sowing cover crops. He's looking after the health of his soil. He's even still growing maize, but he's growing it through grass, so you don't get the runoff, you don't get the wash off. He's been growing his potatoes with a whole border of phycelius, which is a wonderful flowering plant for the insects. So already a lot's being done, but when we introduce our new environmental land management scheme, now that we've left the Common Agricultural Policy, we can have our own policy to tailor make it to deliver these targets. And that is going to be introduced soon. The first bit of it is the Sustainable Farming Initiative, and farmers are already signing up for that. So we're already moving in that direction. And yes, there's an awful lot to do, but I truly believe this government has the policies in place now for us to deliver on these targets. And actually, we need to do it.
OK, Rebecca Powell, thank you. Well, that's everything from us for today. Next time, what's the environmental impact of a volcano eruption? You can find out tomorrow here on The Daily Climate Show. See you then.